Welcome back to Sunrise Daily. As you've seen there, Pastor Ituah Igodalo joins us next. He is a senior pastor of Trinity House. Good morning, and thank you for joining us on the program today. Well, you have been observing as we all prepare to elect people who will lead this country for the next 4 years. You're a leader of people, men yourself. So what is it that comes to you? What do you notice in the entire build-up, either on the part of the people, first of all, how we're preparing, and then much later, the people who we are seeking to elect?
Well, the good thing about this process is that we have some time. It's not as rushed as the other processes. The other good thing is that we have options. We have the PDP, we have the APC, now there's Labour, now there's Kwakwanso, now there's a coalition of the Abiolas and the Adebayos and people like that. And you can see that the fever is palpable. People are anxious, people are interested, people are involved. All manners of matches are being done spontaneously by different kinds of people. The commentary, especially from the press, is very, very hot, aggressive. Every single flicker that our politicians are doing is being noticed. Social media is being used powerfully. And the surprising thing is that almost every Nigerian is on social media. Even in the rural areas, people will be surprised that people in the rural areas also are on social media and they know exactly what is going on. So for people to think that social media is only for the elite or something, they're making a big mistake. Everybody's on social media now. So the information moves very, very fast. And one thing is that INEC seems to be giving us the body language that they want to conduct a reasonably free and fair election. I hope the present political class does not jeopardize that and make it free and fair and continue with the electronic transmission of results and so on and so forth. So the boots are on the ground and we're waiting.
Well, the acceptability of this election, a lot will depend on how INEC carries out their own responsibility. So from what we've seen, the measures that they've announced, which lots of people heard, and that just kind of galvanized them. That was the shot in the arm that many of them needed to go get registered, thinking, okay, if they will do this, I think my vote will count. But from what you've seen, how does that come across to you?
I think INEC had been doing a decent job, a reasonable job, up until when I began to hear an announcement that they may no longer, they may do some physical counting in 1 or 2 places or something like that. They must not do that. They must not try it. Everything this time around must be electronic and there must be counting real time. So as you cast your vote, as the votes are read at the polling booth, what is read at the polling booth is exactly what is going to be announced at the collation center or whatever it is. You don't even need any collation center. Everything goes to the cloud. And everybody now needs to just make sure that they are on the ground at the polling booth and they can get their results off of the polling booth, and that there are no unmanned spaces, no ungoverned spaces. The rural areas, the waterine areas, the deep penetration areas, the people there making sure that everybody can defend and protect his vote. If we have credible elections, if we have elections where there's no malfeasance, there's no rigging, there's no violence, there's no carrying of ballot boxes, and there's no funny announcement of results, I think the Nigerians will generally accept the results of that election. And we'll try and move on with our lives and make the best of whoever wins.
Speaking about moving on, you know, religious leaders play so many roles to different people. Their fathers, their mothers, their psychologists, their counselors, their brothers, their friends, to people who they lead. You know, whichever way the pendulum swings for these elections, people will continue going to their religious organizations or, you know, whatever reason. So if you could share your experience with us, how do you relate or manage that? Should religious leaders have a say? Should they cancel? Should they talk about that? How should they talk about what people do in the next 4 years, for instance, in electing people who they think should lead them?
Historically, what a religious leader or a Christian leader is supposed to do is to hear from God and talk to man. That is why they're placed in that position. You know, in those days, you had the prophets who would go to God. Then you had the judges. So you had what you call a theocracy. That's the biblical background of religious leadership. They would hear from God, and then they would coordinate and administer and say, thus saith the Lord, in the belief that whatever God says is authentic, is true, it cannot fail, and it is God's vision and purpose. Religious leaders should play a similar role of guiding their people. You can have your own personal whatever it is, nobody can stop you from that, but you should guide your people as to what is right and what is wrong. One of the challenges in Nigeria today is that personal interest has overwhelmed the nation and blinded the people such that they no longer know what is right from what is wrong. That's what Isaiah chapter 59, 58, 57, and 60 says. Personal interest blinded the people. They no longer know right from wrong. And that's the biggest challenge in Nigeria. The second challenge is that there's no national vision. There's no vision for Nigeria. What is the vision for Nigeria? What is the ethos? What is that which brings us together? What is the Nigerian dream? We're too sectional, religious, sectional, tribal, sectional, ethnic, and sectional personal interest. And this is where the elite fail us as a nation. They are too interested in themselves, and they don't really care what happens to the nation. So as long as they are okay, they know the man in power is their guy, they can get their way, they can make their business, make their money in whatever aspect of business, then they're okay. The rest of the country can go wherever they're going. This must stop. So religious leaders must let the people know what is proper. What kind of a leader does Nigeria need right now? What kind of a leader does God want Nigeria to have right now? And it's very clear in the scriptures. I'm sure the Quran has their own version of it. A man who is righteous, a man who is visionary, a man who is forthright, or a woman, okay? A man or a woman who is forthright, a man who is capable, a man who is passionate about the nation, a man who is reasonably knowledgeable about the job that he's to do, a shepherd leader, a leader who cares for the people, who cares for the welfare of the people. Okay, Sheikh Al Maktoum says, my job is to make my people happy. A lot of our leaders don't care for the people, and there's no way you can lead a people that you don't really care for. A man who is sensible, a man who fears God, that you can speak to, that is ready to listen, that is not concerned about himself, but determined to make sure that Nigeria realizes its potential and becomes the great nation it's supposed to become. And that's what the religious leaders should be telling the people.
Pastor
Let
Ibenalo,
us choose.
I'm glad that you also say woman there. When you were talking about a man, a man, a man, I'm glad that at some point you mentioned a woman. And oftentimes, you know, even though we're largely concentrated on the national offices, especially the office of the president, and perhaps rightly so, when you think about how much resources are concentrated in the hands of the federal government and how much power a president wields, some people will say that that focus is only right. However, we have, from what we understand, over 11,000 political offices which will be filled come 2023. And all of these attributes which you talk about will be, you know, I imagine would apply to all of the roles which we seek to fill come 2023. I'm just wondering, you know, for you as a pastor, as a man of the cloth, how would you say, because you've talked about how we're a very sectional people, how we're still very divided, and you know we've not been able to rally around a common ethos. How would you say that the church has contributed to this? Because some people will say they cannot understand how we are such a religious people. On every nook and cranny you go to in this country, depending on what part of the country it is, you'll be sure to find at least a mosque or a church, as the case might be. And yet, when it comes to corruption and all of the vices that you can think about, we also have it in abundance. How is this not reflected in our daily lives?
One thing I can tell you categorically, Mark, is that the church also is full of corruption. The church also practices its own kinds of politics. The church also is full of a few corrupted leaders and people who are not quite right, and that is where the challenge is. A lot of people have gone into religion or church not because of the love and the fear of God, but largely because of personal interest, okay, and things they can gain or benefit. And it's that human nature, humanity in man that we're still battling with, okay? My prayer is that the one or two or three really righteous and focused leaders of the church or the other religious organizations can really emerge and rise up and be the stronger voice of reasoning to show the direction, to show the way, and hopefully they have the courage to lead the people. That is what we're suffering from. A lot of our church leaders, they swing both sides. A lot of them, they are influenced through money because of the things that they want. A lot of them are not strong enough and grounded enough in this thing called Christianity or in the fear of God. And it might be the same in the Muslim sect. And therefore, our political leaders take advantage of this and they manipulate the church and they confuse the people. And that is the problem we're having. How that is going to evolve, I'm not really sure. But I know that there are few still very righteous and strong church leaders. And I pray and I have a duty to encourage them to make their voices louder than the others and for them to lead and live by example and hope that we can influence people to follow. Otherwise, we'll be expecting a radical move by God himself, which he has done in the past. If you're a studier of scripture and the moves of God, you know that sometimes God himself comes and takes control and takes charge and works things in a way that man cannot influence or affect. And at the end of it all, you then find out that this indeed is the hand of God. And I knew you were on the set, so I had to start mentioning woman, because I knew you probably would take me up on that. But you know that I do have a lot of love and support. And I do sincerely believe that very soon we should have a female governor, a female president in Nigeria, because I really want the women to stop feeling themselves left in the back. They should come out fighting. They should come out smoking. You control 51% or 52% of the votes. You must encourage yourselves. And I'm quite happy to have a woman, a sincere woman, a strong woman, capable person lead. I don't even care where that person comes from, to be honest. I really don't care. I really don't care what their religion is. I really don't care. They just have to have the right attributes, the right focus, the right determination to make Nigeria great. Al Maktoum is a Muslim. He's doing a fantastic job. Lee Kuan Yew, we didn't even know what religion he was. I'm not even sure he believed in God as such, but he did an amazing job in Singapore. So what do we care? Let the man just know, or the woman, sorry, know exactly what to do. And we're ready to work with that person. And that's my role. That's my passion.
All right, let's bring in our colleagues from Lagos. They've got questions for you as well.
Well, that's right, Chamberlain. Good morning, Pastor Godalo. I see that you have imbibed, Mark West's statements, and of course for women, always representing. But I recall that recently you were quoted as saying that Nigerians should elect or at least choose the least corrupt, most hardworking as their leader, and that, for a lot of people, was quite interesting statement. And yes, the political parties, the actors, they know their game. They're doing it quite well in this season, trying to get the clout, the attention, the crowd, and all of that. But for the people, it might be a bit difficult because you have to choose from all of these candidates. Sometimes you don't even know the difference. So in terms of that statement you made, how can Nigerians exactly decide, okay, this is least corrupt? It looks like you're saying that, well, generally there's corruption, but at least choose the lesser evil. So how can they decide which is least corrupt, most hardworking? What should they look out for?
At least for now, this is where we are. If we had been a bit smarter, we'd have had maybe a slightly better array of candidature. I run a group called the African Leadership Group, ALG, and we do a series every Thursday, and we're putting ourselves together to try and be the leading voice in terms of leadership selection criteria. So we're going to be bringing out very soon a whole bunch of leadership selection criteria an online ability for you to fill a form online. And then out of these 15 or 16 candidates that we have, you can score them based on your knowledge. So for example, we're recruiting a CEO for a bank in Nigeria. You have a selection group. They would, before the selection, itemize the criteria of the kind of person that they need to lead their bank and bring them the profits that they desire. This is what we want to do. That's what the African Leadership Group is working on right now. This leadership criteria. What do we want in a leader? So the second thing is for us to inform the people, because one of the biggest problems with Nigeria is that illiteracy has been weaponized. Our leaders have deliberately kept a lot of people illiterate, ignorant, out of school. And because they don't know their right from wrong, they're easily manipulated, easily influenced with a piece of bread and some wine and some money. So we must educate the people. We must inform the people. That's part of what the African Leadership Group is trying to do, not just in Nigeria, but all over Africa, because we believe in the emancipation of the African, of the Black man, to take their place in the world today. So what are the criteria that we need for a great leader? They said to David, the people went to him and said, David, come and be our king. Why? You have done certain things. Even when Saul was in charge, you are the one who led us in battle. You are faithful, you are loyal, you are focused, you are brave. You killed Goliath a few years ago. You took a band of people who were useless, rotten. You had leadership capabilities. You turned them into mighty men. Therefore, we submit to your leadership. They went to tell him, even though God had anointed him at the age of 17. So what do we want? What does African Leadership Group think are the criteria for a good leader? Number one, he must be visionary. You must have a vision for Nigeria. Where do you want Nigeria to go? What do you want Nigeria to become? You want to be MD of my bank?
We hope
what
that
is your vision
Pastor
for this
Ituah,
bank? Does it?
Pastor Ituah, we hope that Nigerian youths will get on board the African leadership training, and then there will be results. Let me just quickly get this one in, a follow-up to the role of religious leaders. And amid the campaign, even prior to this time, we see a lot of the politicians, participating in particularly now church services, and for good reason, to garner the support that they require for the elections. And we see the role of religious leaders in this case, which is clear. Not in so many words, they show open support for certain candidates. I wonder how proper this would be because of the array of candidates that we have, and the multiplicity of religions that our candidates also represent. And this is where I'm interested in your thoughts along these lines. Going forward, we're going to see a lot of participation of Nigerian politicians in church services, maybe the mosque services as well, for want of a better description. What's your counsel about how religious leaders should, embrace these people without necessarily being partisan?
Well, what the first thing is that their doors should be open. Anybody who wants to come can come. Well, you can't turn every church service or every mosque gathering into a political gathering, but any one of those leaders who want to come, or politicians who want to come to the church to worship, to present themselves, to move around, they're free to come. They should come. It's an open place. The reason why people want to come to churches is because there's a huge gathering of people in churches, and politicians love huge gathering of people. The second thing is that the pastor or the imam or the bishop is very, very influential over his congregation. These are congregants who've been with you for 5, 10, 20 years, who you have lived their lives with, and who you have shown direction in different other areas. They tend to trust you. So the church becomes a very ripe breeding ground for a lot of politicians. But it behoves on the leader of the church to guide these people aright. Listen to these people, hear them, score them, weigh them, and decide. Take your own decision. If you need me to help you to shape your thinking, I'll be very happy to do that. But in politics, you must give everybody a fair chance to present themselves. You must do that. It's very important. That's also a sign of leadership. You must try not to show undue bias, but you must show what you think is right from wrong. And then when the time comes for you to take a decision between Mr. A and Mr. B, you must be able to be bold enough to tell your people, I think I'm going for Mr. B for this and this and this and this reason. And it's up to them to make up their own minds. And that's the role that the church leader must play. We must no longer put our heads in the sand. We must be able to have a position according to how we think we're led by God. If it's politicized, that is part of politics. You cannot run away from it. We all live and dwell and are part of this situation. So this is where we are. And the church leaders must now really be bold and be able to speak truth to power.
All right, so that's for religion and politics. But what would you say to those who suggest that we need to separate the church and the state? Because if we don't do that, some of them argue that we might just find ourselves in a bind here, that if we separate that, it may just be the springboard that we need. So people look at things and then we can think and ensure that development comes as it ought to be on merit, as opposed to perhaps if religion were the state, the church were not separated from the state, that may be a challenge. What's your view on that one?
You know, the origin of that thinking is from two sources. The first source were the church Puritans who feel that the state might corrupt the church. So let's keep the church separate and let's keep the church holy and distinguished, and let's leave it out of the state. The second people who brought that out were also the politicians or the states themselves, who were afraid of the influence of the church over the state, and they therefore wanted to hold on to their own state and say, church, keep quiet, don't get involved. I think for me, that's total nonsense. You cannot separate any church from any state. The church is part of the state, and the state is there for the church. The church must be able to say what it categorically feels about the state and get involved in the manners of the state. I mean, look at the situation in Israel, where David went out of his way to sleep with another man's wife, caused pain and confusion, and murdered the man in cold blood. Nobody could talk. Only the church was able to come to David and said to David, in a very polite and respectful way, told him a proverb, and then said to him, you are the man. You have offended God. You have offended the people. You have brought problem into our land. And therefore, David, this is what God says. Where's the voice of the church? Where's the voice of the religious leaders in telling our governments what they're doing? ASU has been on strike for 6 months, and we're all keeping quiet. The cost of that strike is phenomenal. Our children are not being trained. The little ones that have been trained, they've all run away to America and to this. A friend was telling me recently, he runs a government hospital. He has he used to have 1,500 nurses that he was looking after his hospital. They're down to 625 in the last 1 or 2 years. And everybody's keeping quiet. We can't continue like that. If we cannot talk to our leaders, then they don't deserve to be our leaders. They must end that strike right now. They send people, I mean, let me keep quiet, Sha, but this is...
No, we'll get your point. And, I mean, everybody wants that strike to end. I don't know who doesn't. But just one more thing, one quick one before you go, Pastor. Would you be voting in these elections?
Sure.
Oh, okay. But don't worry, don't tell us who you vote for. But at least good to know that.
I didn't hear that.
Don't bother telling us who you vote for. At least you told us you'll be voting, and that's good enough for us.
I will vote, and I will stay there to make sure my vote is counted.
That's the way to
go. I will vote. I must vote.
That's the way to go. Thank you very much indeed, Pastor Ituah Ighodalo, Senior Pastor, Trinity House. All right, so...
Thank you for having me. Bless you, Chamberlain.
Always a pleasure.
Bless you.
So much. All right.
And I
hope you run. You run for office, Markwe.
So there you go.
At some point.
There you go. So let people clamor and say, hey, we want you to do certain things. And you never can tell. That will be interesting to see. So as many people as can, go out there, get your voices heard. Don't sit back. Don't just be on social media. Go out there. You have a right to. Nobody can tell you not to. Okay.